I never anticipated that my father would publicly disgrace me, nonetheless.
I was positioned at the center of an expansive dining hall encircled by family members attired in their nicest. The atmosphere was saturated with the aroma of grilled pork and costly wine, an exceedingly unpleasant judgment. You are merely a source of disappointment to me. The father's voice pierced the din. His icy, scrutinizing eyes are like a sword penetrate my being, overwhelmed with revulsion. You are merely a failure rendered the room silent. All eyes were upon it. Turned to me. I tightened my hands. My nails were embedded in my palm. I had arrived. Here.
I anticipated friction. But not to this extent. My father had consistently maintained emotional distance.
But this, it was distinct, it was intimate. His words were not solely intended to reprimand me, they were engineered to dismantle me. He advanced a step, gently mixing the wine in his glass. Is this truly the effort of man before derision? What you have resorted to lacks substance. Some of my aunt's shared shame glances indicate evident discomfort.
Yet no one has the courage to enter. I gulped nervously.
Dry throat. There is nothing amiss. Father's arduous labor elicited a strong exclamation. He laughs while shaking his head, indicating that you are hard-working. Consider mopping floors and lifting heavy objects. Is labor to which you were inherently predisposed privilege. Yet you opt to demean. You bring disgrace to our name. I could sense my breathing becoming shallow. My vision has been constricting. I have dedicated years to this endeavor, endeavoring to demonstrate my competence through labor relentlessly.
Yet to him, it was inconsequential, was significant prior to my ability to articulate anything. Another voice interrupted the previous one. Terrible burden that subdued even my father. You should all be aware of the truth.
The voice was mine. Grandad had remained sitting at the furthest extremity of the elongated dining table,
silent during my father's tenure, yet, as he gradually rose, all eyes were upon him, transferred to him.
Grandad was an individual of few words.
Yet when he spoke, everybody listened.
Listened to his silver hair meticulously styled. The back shimmered beneath the chandelier's illumination. His presence commanded respect. The father's sneer diminished. For the first he inquired about the truth.
His voice uncertain. Grandfather positioned both hands on the table. He surveyed the room,
his gaze encompassing those present. Prior to focusing on my father's subsequent, the words reverberated around the room. The sole disgrace in this situation is yours, not hers. My father was plainly disturbed by the whispers that emerged. The rigid grandfather exhaled gradually prior to proceeding. His voice remained resolute. All of you believe you understand the origins of prosperity originates from your belief in this empire constructed by occupying workplaces whilst attired in costly suits, condescending towards others who labor with their hands, and their eyes shone incisively with an inscrutable quality. Subsequently,
you ought to discern the veracity, and with that, he commenced elucidating a narrative that would alter everything upon which everyone depended. Even my father,
who seconds prior had been so confident in himself, now appeared. The apprehensive Grandad cast a peek at me prior to reverting to the assembly.
This family was not constructed on opulence, it was established on exerting immense effort and dedication. I initiated the process of straightening.
He continued to speak as I blinked at what I observed in my youth.
I possessed nothing. Not a solitary item. Coin to my name. Unlike my son here, I cast my father a significant glance that I did not inherit the wealth I have created. It astonishes and proliferates. What are you discussing across the table concerning my father?
He remarked in a strained voice. His grandfather disregarded him. I commenced as I dedicated years to being a construction worker, exerting much effort in bricklaying and mixing cement application under the intense sunlight merely to subsist. Every single cent I contributed to the establishment of this family. I never felt guilt in my heart. I had never encountered this previously. Manual labor is not beneath us. It persisted,
altering my father's expression. That is absurd.
You consistently stated we constructed our riches together. The grandfather of investments chuckled dryly. His voice became caustic regarding investments. The initial parcel of land I acquired was beyond my financial means. I labored tirelessly,
day and night,
to afford it. Strive to accumulate sufficient funds. That constituted the first investment. Encompassed the entire room. Astonished silence.
And he now gazed at me. Father,
you deride your own daughter for engaging in my previous actions. You mock her
for engaging in manual labor, as I did. He derided,
asserting that it is not she who contributes, it is you who brings shame to this family, neglecting our origins. Father's jaw tightened. I had enough. Grandfather stated with a stern voice.
I am not. Upon completion, he turned to me. And it was the first instance that evening I experienced a sensation.
Unanticipated pride evokes a reflection of my own personality, he stated. And that is the reason I have created a. My gut flipped at the decision. The grandfather surveyed the remainder of the I have been contemplating this matter regarding family. He proclaimed for an extended period that he constructed this empire will soon require a successor. My father, naturally, straightened up. That has consistently been the plan. His eyes met those of his grandfather, who had severed ties with him. I select her over. The entire room erupted in whispers as my father abruptly rose from a seat. His countenance flushed with fury. Cannot be serious.
Grandfather persisted. I have never been more resolute in my life. My breath was taken away by my grandfather.
He raised a hand to silence me. I have observed your work. Strive,
contend,
and endure while others would have relinquished. That is what the leader requires. My father to crash his glass, splashing crimson wine across the white surface tablecloth that cannot be simply handed.
Entrust everything to her, she is unqualified to handle it. Execute any task. Grandfather's gaze intensified. He allowed the words to resonate with us prior to contributing. You have dedicated your life deriving sustenance from my achievements while ridiculing others who, in fact, have accomplished nothing. Merit this empire of my father's. His breathing was labored, and his fists were clenched. This is a jest. It pertains to justice. His grandfather. I observed my father, who was harboring deep animosity. He had always considered himself entitled to all possessions, and now the foundation had been undermined beneath him. I sensed a conflagration explode within me. This transcended my personal concerns. About the demonstration that diligent effort was valuable,
regardless of your location. Initiated the construction of something, for I aligned my spine and confronted me father's unyielding glare.
Determination to observe me as a failure.
Then he was on the verge of witnessing. Merely he was profoundly mistaken. The place was in disarray. Family members engaged in intense whispers. They exchanged astonished stares. Father's visage was a tempest of emotions. I am engulfed in wrath,
astonishment, and humiliation. The opposite hand experienced something quite different, distinct for the inaugural occasion in my existence. I felt acknowledged.
My grandfather had selected me. I had devoted years to being disparaged and mocked,
regarded as if I were insignificant. And now, in the presence of all, the most formidable and individual in our family had designated me as his successor. Father, you cannot be serious. Father's voice was hoarse, his hands trembled as he clutched the edge of the. She possesses no experience or commercial acumen.
That she has been squandering her time with. Grandfather inhaled hard at the menial labor. What have you been doing? Under his gaze was exploiting my labor,
residing in opulence whilst condescending towards the fundamental basis that provided you with such. My father expressed his privilege. He then closed it,
and his face grew red. I could perceive my heart thumping in my chest.
I was uncertain regarding its origin, exhilaration or trepidation. This was occurring excessively rapid, and I had not yet assimilated. Inquired about its meaning.
Grandpa. The voice emanating more steadily than mine. Are you certain about this expectation? His countenance softened as he gazed at me. I have never been more assured about anything throughout my life.
I have experienced hesitation. I lack the requisite business background. That is precisely why you are like them. He asserted that this was the correct decision.
The family needs someone who comprehends that the significance of diligence extends beyond mere numerical representation. I swallowed hard at the spreadsheet. I have always considered myself as the outsider in this household, as the individual who did not belong.
Yet upon hearing those words, my grandfather created something within me. A transformation occurred, yet my father was not involved, prepared to relinquish.
This is absurd. I have devoted my entire life. She cannot just prepare to assume control. Enter and seize what belongs to me. Your eyes clouded like your grandfather's. Believe you are entitled to my legacy merely due to your surname.
He shook his head, disappointed. You were expected to attain it. Something you never accomplished. My father's. His chest heaved, his face a blend of fury and terror. He was not merely losing. He was losing control over the inheritance, the authority he had spent years wielding. He murmured that this is not finished. Surpassing others. His voice perilously deep.
Granddad directed him a stern gaze. The decision rests with you. And thus the conversation concluded.
Grandfather resumed his seat. He took a leisurely sip of his beverage while the room persisted. Anxious. Yet no one ventured to confront him. The gravity of the recent occurrence was conferred upon me.
the heir to a vast empire. Yet I also created an adversary of my father, and something informed me he would not relinquish this matter. The gathering concluded in an uncomfortable quiet. Relatives averted their look while others offered me tentative nods of approval. Father had exited abruptly from my mother, following him with concern. I exhaled while running a hand through my hair.
This was surreal, prepared for a confrontation.
I turned to observe my cousin Daniel is standing alongside me. Was among the few in the family I genuinely connected with.
And I emitted a dry sound. Indeed.
I perceived that image he conveyed provide me with a little smile. You conducted yourselves well. Previously.
I did not manage. Did my granddad hear anything? I muttered despite your indifference. You remained resolute. That exceeds the majority of individuals in this. The family can express their appreciation for his comments. Nonetheless, they did not alleviate the escalating tension within my chest.
This matter transcended my individual concerns. This was about demonstrating that I was deserving of what had just been bestowed. He was uncertain about how to begin before I could articulate anything further. The phone vibrated with a message from an unidentified source. You do not belong on this planet. Depart before it becomes too late. I experienced a shudder ran down my spine. The struggle had the following morning. I awoke. To discover my name prominently displayed. The news identifies billionaires lacking qualifications. Granddaughter as heir is disastrous selection of the subsequent leader or nepotism. Instance mismanaged ex-manual labor group. Experts respond to inheriting a family empire.
My stomach churned. I had never experienced such a sensation. Previously.
I was not in the public eye. Focal point for all the erroneous reasons / cause. I grasped my phone.
Throbbing.
As I navigated social, the remarks on social media were harsh towards her. Absence of business experience renders this a farce. If I were in that family, I would be infuriated with her. Exploited her grandfather's favoritism. Clenched my teeth as I bypassed the queue. Anticipated opposition from my father, yet
the entire world now held an opinion about me. A call was received from my grandfather. I responded to my grandfather promptly. Presume you have observed the news.
He stated he sighed and admitted in a calm voice, the media will perpetually have commentary to offer. What is significant is your response.
I conclude my eyes. And how should I respond to your proof they were mistaken? It was more easily articulated than executed. And as I would soon discover, my father harbored no intention of permitting my success during the subsequent week.
I was immersed in the comprehensive sessions about financial reports and business terminology that bewildered me.
I had scarcely a moment to breathe.
Yet I persevered. I worked late into the night. I studied extensively.
Although I declined to be the failure they anticipated I would become. One morning,
I entered a boardroom. During the meeting, I discerned that something was off. All were murmuring with their gazes. Turned toward me with minimal concealment. I frowned as I slid into my seat. My father sat opposite me. From me a victorious glimmer in his eyes. The CEO has been cleared. Mississippi, we have some concerns regarding his throat. He presented a document exacerbating fears. About your management. He reviewed the company's accounts. Analyzing the figures caused my blood to run cold. This was not merely a little error. The financial report was disastrous. Has been disclosed, revealing substantial losses under my name. Incurs losses that I did not cause. I had been set up with a fabrication. I glanced upward and observed my father. Observing me smiling suggests that you may not be suited for this. Consequently, he articulated my thoughts with ease. The grasp on the paper intensified. This was warfare. I was determined to resist vigorously. The atmosphere in the boardroom was oppressive. I sensed the burden of each pair of eyes observing me. Anticipating my actions, my father sat opposite me, reclining on his chair with a sneer that incited my ire.
He drawled, tilting his head in mockery.
Do you have any justification for your actions?
I tightened my grip, my jaw and fingers constricting around I re-examined the numbers in the document, seeking anything that might elucidate the circumstances around this occurrence. These losses were not genuine, I was aware of it. Were not. Save for others in this context.
The room contained irrefutable evidence of the figures are erroneous. Declared, my voice resolute despite the internal tempest. I did not sanction transactions. The CEO expressed sympathy towards me.
The documents indicate a different conclusion. Mississippi.
I inhaled sharply. Thereafter someone interfered with my view, captured my father.
And I believe we all recognize the identity of that individual.
Gasps reverberated past the boardroom.
Yet my father merely he chuckled,
moaned,
and expressed blame, addressing her as sweetheart.
Blaming others for your errors is unwise. The blatant hubris in the tone induced a visceral reaction in my stomach. And I was able to perceive that his actions were not merely attempts. He was attempting to discredit me, degrade me, to shatter me publicly. I declined to permit him. Regarding these individuals, victory will be granted. I require 48 hours. I stated while rising. I will demonstrate that these numbers are fraudulent. The CEO hesitated before the remainder of the board exchanged dubious glances, and then ultimately the CFO acquiesced, stating,
"Very well. But if you
failure to provide evidence will result in your removal." Fromi inhaled deeply. In your stance I comprehended and began to depart, but did not. Prior to establishing eye contact with my father, the smirk persisted. Although there was also amusement in his eyes. He believed he had already triumphed. But he had not. "You significantly underestimated me. A grave error on your part." I meticulously examined every detail that night, comprehensive financial record of each transaction, attempting to identify the imperfection in my father's configuration.
Although the individual who had fabricated the figures had performed exceptionally well in concealing their actions, I required assistance. And there was solely one individual in whom I placed my trust. "This is my cousin Daniel, awaiting my arrival at his flat at dawn."
He glanced at my expression, conveyed exasperation. "Allow me to surmise your thoughts. My father ultimately executed his plans."
And I complied. "He is attempting to frame me with the files. I have 48 hours to demonstrate that this is fraudulent. Or I am leaving." Daniel whistled. "But he is not present." While engaging in playful activity,
I massaged my temples. "I am fatigued. Can you assist me or not?"
Smiled. "Do you truly need to inquire internally?" Minutes after he had configured his laptop,
fingers swiftly navigating the keyboard as he analyzed the transaction records.
Daniel had always been watched in wonder. The technologically savvy individual in the family at this moment. I require every bit of his. 1 hour elapsed. Then 2. Until discovery occurred, Daniel exclaimed abruptly. I was startled. Where he oriented the screen in my direction, there exists a difference in the timestamps. The system logs every action, including modifications made to these papers by an individual, subsequent to their initial creation. I leaned in, my heart racing. And then I observed it as a digital footprint.
Specifically an IP address.
I inhaled a breath. "That belongs to my father." Daniel in the office smiled. "Bingo! We have him." However, I was not inclined to address him directly. However, if he intended to engage in unscrupulous tactics,
I would demonstrate to him that I could engage in more strategic play. It was time to reverse the situation. The following day I entered the boardroom with a confidence I had not previously experienced.
Father was already present, at ease in his chair,
prepared to observe my failure. The CEO inquired whether any proof exists to support this. "Substantiate your assertion." I submitted the printed document. The documents on the table were not merely "these figures have been modified,"
but I also possess evidence of who modified. The board members inclined as I activated a button on my tablet, and a display illuminated behind me.
A security log was generated indicating the precise instant the bank records were altered.
And at the bottom,
the IP address of my father's office. The silence was overwhelming. I turned to confront. My father saw as a smirk dissipated, his complexion diminished. "Would you want to elucidate?" the father inquired gently as he opened his. The CEO opened his mouth. Yet no words emerged. He cleared his throat. "This is serious." Another board member expressed dissent. "Cannot disregard this form of persuasion." Whispers circulated across the room. My father was losing control.
And I was merely initially. My father's visage was an overwhelming tempest of emotions: shock, fury,
and predominantly dread. He had meticulously managed over years. The story guarantees that no individual ever doubted his authority and is currently in at that singular moment.
I had deprived him of that. I folded my arms, allowing the power to manifest. Silence envelop, allowing him to experience the burden of his own demise. However, he ultimately articulated, his voice acute with urgency. "These documents may have been influenced by anyone."
Smirked.
"Then you will not object to our presence upon additional investigation?"
I directed my attention to the right. "I recommend a comprehensive forensic audit to the CEO pertaining to all recent financial activities to ensure this is not a more significant issue."
My father exacerbated the matter. He was aware what that said was that he had likely performed significantly worse than merely framing me.
The auditors commenced their investigation. "Identify any superfluous elements," he stated promptly.
Oh,
I believe it is the CFO,
stated his voice icily.
This organization cannot tolerate fraud or corruption. My father clenched his jaw. His hands forming into fists, he was ensnared and aware of it. Then the CEO addressed me, stating,
"You have demonstrated."
He stated that we will clarify today your name.
"And I will personally guarantee that you are provided with the resources to acknowledge my gratitude for the opportunity to excel in this position." Subsequently,
the CEO directed his gaze towards my father.
"As you will need to engage in a discussion
concerning your future with this organization."
Witnessed the instant he comprehended he experienced defeat for the first time in my life. My father exerted little authority over me. I experienced an extraordinary sensation that evening upon my returning home with a sense of triumph. Although I was aware it was preferable to celebrate prematurely due to my father's disposition. Someone who acknowledged his defeat, confirming my correctness subsequently. That evening, I received a message from an unidentified number. "Please retain this information. Is not concluded. You appropriated something that does not belong to you. And I want to seize it."
I exhaled softly while grasping my phone. I had anticipated this. My father was not merely going to recede into the background, he intended to engage in combat.
And if I did not, he would exercise caution and do whatever was necessary to ruin me.
Although I remained unafraid because it possessed something he never attained that I had acquired, I remained at my location and had no intention of departing the following morning. EOK awoke to tumultuous news articles inundated social media,
depicting me as an unseasoned,
pampered individual whores embezzled $1 billion from the empire. Nepotism as a detrimental legacy, the controversial ascension from Labour to CR regarding an inadequate successor. Sources indicate internal discord is fracturing the company. I was certain of the identity of the perpetrator. My father utilized the media to undermine my credibility, to manipulate public perception. Opposed me before to my opportunity to demonstrate my capabilities, however.
He had miscalculated.
I contacted Daniel. "I require your assistance. Identify the source of these leaked stories within an hour." Subsequently, he provided a response indicating its origin: public relations firms associated with your father's own accounts. He stated he is expending millions to manipulate the narrative.
Gritted my teeth.
Then we altered. He understood just how to construct the tale. I chose to address the rumors rather than contest them. I planned a live session with them, interview regarding the largest enterprise. The network was positioned against a merciless journalist recognized for criticizing individuals separately.
And I permitted them to pose the most challenging inquiries.
Questions. Individuals assert you are unworthy of. What is your opinion on this position? I stated their entitlement to interrogate me. Honestly, I request additional time. My acts are self-evident. Father alleges you used manipulation to persuade your granddad to grant you control. You refute that my grandfather created his decision due to his belief in me and my declining to disappoint him. By the time that the interview concluded,
influencing public perception, I had transformed myself from ruined days for the underdog in combat for her proper position. And the people adored her as an underdog. A week later, my father burst into my office. "Do you believe you have?" he hissed. 1.
As I reclined in my chair, I have not remained cool. His hands are clenched. "I am unaware of your actions," I encountered his.
"And yet I remain upright while you are the individual who has lost everything." Was breathing heavily across his entire body, emanating wrath. Yet there was an element, alternatively, in his gaze, something nearly like fear, as he inherently recognized my lack of authenticity.
"I am no longer weak. I have fought back. It was a challenging victory. Obstacles remained. Others inside the organization who questioned my capabilities, investors who showed reluctance, faced obstacles that seemed insurmountable.
Yet I exerted greater effort than I have ever experienced.
And after several months of demonstrating my capabilities subsequent to surmounting every obstacle,
I ultimately confronted the barrier,
the employees of the company, and provided the ration of my life.
My grandfather established this company from its inception. Stated.
And I aim to uphold his legacy. Not through remaining in an office, but by ensuring that all individuals within our organization are re-esteemed regardless of their heritage. Applause ensued.
Marking the inaugural instance, I had a sense of belonging. I never perceived my father once more after his disappearance. Suffocating under the repercussions of his own at times, I pondered whether he ever lamented his actions,
Although ultimately it was inconsequential that I had constructed something superior to his capabilities due to my possession of established respect and genuine hard work.
And that constituted a legacy worthy of bequeathing. Years later,
as I traversed,
I passed by a company that I currently manage. I halted while the janitor scrubbed the floors. I bent down to retrieve another mop. The janitor gazed at me with astonishment.
Expressing that he misses me, I smiled. There is no obligation to do that. Is beneath me, because this was the lesson imparted by my granddad. I will never forget that. As I reflect on the past, recognized a truth my father had consistently conveyed. Have been apprehensive that if individuals appreciate the skyline, demonstrated that diligence was of greater significance
than to privilege his entire existence, would disintegrate. And ultimately that was precisely what transpired. Although I had constructed something more potent, something authentic, and I would never want it to be confiscated. As I was standing in my office, gazing out at the skyline, I realized I had committed an error. Unexpectedly,
I had transformed my greatest shame into my greatest triumph.
And in doing so, I had transcended mere existence. A name I had adopted was unstoppable. Merely the inception.